am not, hello, okay. I am not a political person, and neither are most of the people sitting in the audience here today. This generation is exposed to many different versions or perspectives of current events, yet rarely do we dive deep into the complexities beneath the surface. Personally, I despise politics. I think it's far too complex and at times too unethical for me. However, as we navigate our daily lives, we cannot escape the effects of global conflicts, often fueled by the very political intricacies we might prefer to avoid. In the first days of our social studies class, the teacher often asked a question, one that has stood the test of time. Why do we bother learning history? And the monotonous answer to this question was always, so history doesn't repeat itself. But what happens in reality is a different question that remains unanswered. Why does this persist, and why is so little being done to break this vicious cycle? Right now, people my age have a similar mindset, a dream to go to universities in the US, UK, or any Western country. Why? Because it is perceived as a more well-developed nation providing more opportunities for its people. However, behind these dreams lies a deeper reality, a world complicatedly divided by its economic disparities, historical legacies, and geopolitical factors. And this phenomenon is known as power imbalance. Understanding power imbalance is crucial, as it shapes the dynamics between nations and serves as a catalyst for tensions, political strife, and violence. It goes beyond resource distribution and includes disparities in influence, unequal voice in international matters, and the difference in the impact of statements. All this lays the foundations for territorial disputes, identity conflicts, economic disparities, and geopolitical factors. This can lead to ongoing conflicts like the ones that happen between Russia-Ukraine and Israel-Palestine, as well as many other devastating genocides that occurred in Myanmar, Darfur, and many other countries. So, to understand diplomacy, we need to acknowledge an advantage that wealthier countries possessed, known as soft power. So what is soft power? It is an advantage, a persuasive approach to international relations that includes cultural or economic influence. So think of it this way. Imagine you're in a class and the teacher starts assigning random group leaders. One of them is top of the class, gets an A in everything, and is the teacher's favorite student. Naturally, you're more inclined to want to be in the top students group, right? Why? Because they have a great reputation, and that is soft power. Wealthier countries wield influence globally through culture, diplomacy, and attractive ideologies, and they can shape international decisions in ways we may not always be aware of. Influence is crucial to power imbalance, and often the root cause for ongoing conflicts. So what does this tell us? It shows the need for a more effective system in which nations can voice their concerns. Well, guess what? There already is one, and that's diplomacy. Let's unpack the term diplomacy. It's not just a word. It's an art and science of maintaining peaceful relationships. Whether through coercive or co-operative strategies, diplomacy helps countries in communicating and finding common ground. It also helps in creating diplomatic sanctions, coalitions, conventions, and protocols. Diplomacy is essentially a strategic game that involves navigating through global tensions. And in this game, there are two modes, coercive and co-opted diplomacy. In coercive diplomacy, one can use threats or economic pressure to seek compliance, which is basically like geopolitical blackmailing. On the other hand, co-opted diplomacy attracts and wins over others willingly, almost like making friends, just with a deeper purpose than just hanging out. Now, to understand how diplomacy works, let's look at a historical example, the Cuban Missile Crisis. a dangerous confrontation between the United States and the Soviet Union. And the US president of that time, John F. Kennedy, had strategically used coercive diplomacy to force the Soviets to remove their missiles from Cuba. The strategic use of coercive diplomacy here had saved millions of lives that day. And today we recognize this conflict as showing the immense power that diplomacy has. So why is diplomacy crucial, you may ask? Well, we don't want to experience the real-life version of our favorite summer movie, Oppenheimer. Our world cannot bear any more wars, and diplomacy is our ideal path to preventing conflicts. Now, to emphasize on the importance of diplomacy, let's go back to 1914, the events leading up to World War I known as the July Crisis. A breakdown in effective communication and understanding between major powers led to escalations that ultimately ended as a catastrophic conflict. This historical episode serves as a reminder of the pivotal role that diplomacy plays in averting the devastating outcomes of war. The power of unspoken words, the sway they hold over nations and concealed truths, can lead to unnecessary disagreements that could otherwise be resolved through conversation. Countries usually immediately go to war and start fighting over things, which is really unnecessary because we need to broaden our perspectives and listen and understand what each person has to say. And often, only one side of an argument is shown, and that's the one we choose to trust. In minor disputes like buying a new phone, we usually only consider one perspective, and that is our own, neglecting the potential burden that this may have on our parents. In the broader context of global conflicts, a similar issue arises. Only half of the story is produced to the world, and this can lead to many unnecessary conflicts happening. Both the nations responsible for their actions and those affected must have the right to express their actions and motivations, to create effective solutions to ongoing conflicts. Countries nowadays spend millions to create monuments to ensure that our history is not forgotten. Yet despite these efforts, historical mistakes continues to persist. In the aftermath of World War I, we've seen that the creation of harsh punishments and strict treaties can lead to unexpected consequences, like the rise of authoritarian leaders with iconic mustaches. In our complex world, conflicts still exist despite the existence of peacekeeping organizations like the UN, forcing us to question their efficiency. Despite the UN's noble intentions, the persistence of conflicts highlights the need for a re-evaluation of the strategies used to respond to these global challenges. Our world cannot bear any more wars. And every day, this world is getting more fragile. I think everyone here would like to live a little longer without having to see the end of the world. And the only logical and executable solution to ongoing conflicts is effective diplomacy. The lessons of history taught us that diplomacy is not just a choice, but a necessity. And although disagreements are inevitable, the magnitude of it can be diminished. I may not be a political person, but I do believe that it is pathetic for global challenges to keep going on like this. When countries can just talk it out. Yeah. Like I mentioned before, I do find it pathetic that most of today's global conflicts. So basically, diplomacy is what we need for our planet. And I think that this could easily be resolved through talking it out instead of creating unnecessary disagreements that could lead to war and we can spare millions of lives through diplomacy. Thank you.